Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to have you here on this last afternoon of the Global Landscapes Forum. You have spent the last 2 days talking about how to do integrated landscape management, how to bring farmers and environmentalists and governments together with businesses and all the other actors in landscapes to try to move beyond the trade-offs and try to find and negotiate and capture the synergies among what lots of different groups do. And one of the fundamental aspects of this is collective action. And the objective of this session here is to talk to a number of people who have been working and thinking hard about how to have successful collective action and share with us some of their insights. So I'd like to ask all of the members of the panel to come up. And as you do so, come and take your seat. We have 6 distinguished panelists. One is Dennis Garrity with the Evergreening Global Alliance, who's going to give us some perspective, particularly around grassroots mobilization for collective action. Hiroto Mitsugi from FAO, Forestry, who's going to talk about program development and collective action. Hedvig Bruggemann from the Wageningen Center for Development Innovation, who's going to talk about how we can use leadership skills for improving the quality of our collective action. We have Woojin Koo from the International Network for Bamboo and Rattan in Bar, who's going to talk about South-South and regional cooperation. We have Michael Klein. You can wave if people don't know who you are. Michael Klein from UFRO, who's going to talk about the scientific community and how it can become more effective in collective action. And finally, we'll be talking with Kaoru Kitajima from Kyoto University, who's going to talk about how training and alumni networks and other types of actions in academia can improve the quality of collective action with academia and without. So we're going to try to have a conversation here, and I'm going to first ask each one of the panelists to just give us a brief introduction of what it is you've actually learned. And I think you were going to put some slides up with sort of the key questions of the session. So why don't we start with Dennis? What have you learned about effective collective action? What's your evidence? Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Sarah. For the past several years, I've been really focused on the development of an alliance, the Evergreening Global Alliance, which brings together a whole bunch of international development NGOs, conservation NGOs, governments, research and development organizations, who are working in many countries in the tropics, and particularly in Africa, in thousands and thousands of communities. And their issue is implementing massive scaling up of land restoration practices. And the thing is, we've come to learn that it's possible because it's based on the deep interests of these organizations and their willingness to develop a trust with each other to reach scale. And I think that deep and extensive trust is one of the key things that is fundamental to building a consortium like this. And then their presence in these many, many communities to be able to build on those experiences, those relationships, and make things happen across vast areas. Those are a couple of things that we've really seen create impact at a massive scale.
That's great, Dennis. Starting at the grassroots, let me ask Hiroto to say something about when we move from the community level into the programmatic area.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So for the FAO, so this landscape has always been a core and important work for us. And so that, and also our mandate is just quite a variety range of the land production, such as agriculture, farm cropping, forestry, and waters. And so, but the thing of this landscape movement, so how to just make the good collaboration in each other's, maybe in the other world. So connecting that is quite important to working together, and also which including that not only the institutions, also the peoples and the policy, or everything about it. And then, so that connection it's quite neat. Maybe the previous session for the finance institutions more now become more important at this moment. And then, so for the communities, so there's no distinction among such institutions and the sector and so on. So how does make it a good asset which we are going to provide for the communities? So at the same time, also we need some quite broad sense of the idea to see what happened in the field. And of course, in the landscape issues, we needed many, many targets for restore the land. But at the same time, also we need to identify what we needed. So beyond the land restorations, so there are the livelihood and also food securities and also poverty reduction net. So the beside of the target of the actual biophysical target of the reforestation and of restorations. So we need to consider quite broad eyes to see what happened in the field beyond landscapes. Of course, we are now thinking about it. The landscape should include this concept, but we need to more confirm again that we need it in the field. That's it. Okay. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. Hedwig?
Yes, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me here. As I said, when on Friday evening we had the charter meeting, I said, well, first time for me at the GLF, and I will have a steep learning curve. And I really did have a steep learning curve. And what is really stick to my mind is what yesterday was being said by Jacuba and Rinaldo about the techniques are there when it comes to landscape approaches. He said the techniques have been there for 50 years. And myself, I'm a practitioner, and I was working in late 80s, beginning 90s in Chad and Burkina Faso. And also we were working with these techniques in what we then called land use planning programs and projects. So we did all this. And so the techniques are there. And maybe what we were just talked about earlier, that is maybe the last mile is being this collective action what we need. That's what is the extra thing, and that's what we have been working at also at Wageningen University Research. And just to share with you an interesting study which was done by my colleague Cora van Oosten, is that over the past years we have these landscape courses and we asked questions to over 150 participants, and we said, what do you really need to make the difference? What is it that you need? And they all confirm that what they need is really process skills. They need leadership skills and process skills. They want to learn how to work in multi-stakeholder situations, how to get people together, how to make sure that you understand what the other's objectives are so that you can bring them together and meet the difference. And of course, all this cannot go without changes in institutions and governance. And that is really what we have to look at, the combination of leadership skills and process skills and changes in institutions and governance.
Okay. Thank you very much. Wu, you want to say a few words here, operating at this different scale?
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Wu Junqi from the INBAR International Organization, Bamboo and Rattan Organization. INBAR actually is an international intergovernmental organization dedicated to the Bamboo and Rattan mission. We have the headquarters based in China, and also we have the regional offices from Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. Our mission is to promote the utilization of bamboo and rattan through actions helping our member states to achieve their sustainable development goals. In the over past 20 years, INBAR has been actually closely working with our partners from the international, regional, and the national societies, and together with our member states through on the South-South cooperation related issues with bamboo. We actually, for the organization, started from a small group of 9 countries when the organization was established in 1997. But now we are representing actually 44 member countries, who are mainly from the Global South. That's a very big network for the Global South societies. So far we are recognized as the observer of the United Nations General Assembly and the rest of the UN bodies, including like ECSOC, UNCCD, UNCCC, and also we are a partner of the FTE program. That's all of them so important for us to promote our South-South cooperation for bamboo topic to help the landscape management. Today, actually, we are going to work with GLF to be a chart member of GLF, of the forum, which will broaden our network of partners even further for the future. To the end, this time, we are coming here to the GLF 2018 to promote bamboo as an alternative solutions for landscape management. Let's remember always, no bamboo, no panda. Yeah, bamboo is so important for the landscape management, including the biodiversity, always. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael, tell us about your experience with
Yes,
collective action.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. I don't think I need to introduce UFRO as the global network for science cooperation.
Can you actually do that? Because there may be some people who do not know
Okay, the
it.
International Union of Forest Research Organization, of course, a global network of 650 member organizations, a large number of scientists in 126 countries in the world. And the standard would be to providing innovative approaches and sound analysis to the socio-economic, but also, of course, ecological challenges in the transition to more sustainable land use. Science community can, of course, help to speed up these processes, definitely. They should be integrated into scientific backstopping, monitoring, capacity building. But, of course, to be more effective on that, and of course, partly things are happening already. They should be more integrated in an FLR process, which should be understood as a social process. So our very visible members, like C4, like ICRAF, like Katja, for example, of course, there are things happening already. But we have a large number of members in smaller countries, in not so wealthy countries, where this integration process of participation of scientists in local restoration, local change processes is not happening or insufficiently happening. We have also heard that, of course, simply providing scientific information is not enough. There must be science communication, there must be science policy interfacing, so an active integration of this knowledge to those other partners, those decision makers, and those who provide funding, provide the framework also to do these changes would be needed. So a much more active role of scientists in the social process of FLR.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kaoru, give us your perspective.
I'm really glad to hear the word science again and again. And I'm representing Kyoto University, University of Florida, but really I'm speaking on behalf of the teachers, professors, universities that have been involved in training students from developing countries. We need people from developing countries, small countries, large countries, forest-rich countries, who can think critically, have disciplinary rigor, and actually can have dialogue with stakeholders. This is a tall order. We need to be able to talk across disciplines. We need to have at the same time disciplinary rigor. Lately, I'm a member of the IPCC's special report lead author group on climate change, land degradation, desertification, and food security. Extremely complex. The IPCC has an amazing system of having people, scientists from many different countries, They balance gender, they balance nationality, geographical regions, and specialities. We need people. We need academically well-trained critical thinkers, because we may find landscape is a good word, but we need to have a critical examination like the previous keynote speaker. We need good critical thinkers who actually can have a brilliant new ideas, but we have to also have good evaluation. We have to have evidence-based, evidence-backed actions. But for that, I think academic training continues to have a critical role, not just skills. It's just something more than that. I sometimes tell the students, to be a scientist is to be able to uncover others' lies. There may be lies, there may be easy statement, but you have to go down diligently to evidence. And I think that's something I'd like to bring to the forum here too.
Great. Thank you very much. I am convinced by these 6 folks about exactly how important collective action is and being effective in doing so. I'd like to push you all a little further on this. Just to be in a group, just to have a group that calls itself a network or that calls itself a community isn't enough. What is the biggest thing that gets in the way of effective collective action? And what do you feel is the biggest point that your experience has overcome it? So Dennis, you said trust. How do you build trust? Tell us 2 things that are done in these collectives that generate trust.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with many large organizations, their own institutional culture is driving so much of the way they look at the world. And so bringing them together and building trust requires them to obviously see from their own perspective a benefit they're going to get from the alliance engagement that wouldn't have occurred on its own. And the biggest benefit that I think our partners are seeing in this situation is that the kind of scale of programs and projects that can be generated when organizations put their talents and their resources together and actually impress those who are investing in large scale to get behind them. More and more, as we know, donors are looking at larger and larger scale investments and are turning from individual organizations to consortia of various kinds. And so that's probably been the biggest draw for these large organizations to participate in something bigger than themselves.
So the larger community is supporting the idea of collective action in a way that they probably didn't do 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Okay. Hiroto, what in your perspective is the big barrier and what is being done to explicitly make that collective action effective?
Yes. Theoretically, we can say that communications and also setting institution and something we can say that. But more or less, the important thing is how do we make it a good story? Or should be storytellers. So which means that how do we attract so outside people, stakeholders to look at? So what we have to do that in these restorations. So that is quite important things. So also this previous session, also the how do we just change the behaviors? This is quite important, but this is a challenge. So this totally depends on the setting, the communities, and probably also the local setting as well. But we have to try it. So how do you put on the good stories and to tell the outside quite simple message and to attract and their own ideas, also to change their behaviors. So this is also to asking that also financial institution as well.
So we need a collective story that's jointly generated by the people in the collective. Kaoru, what's been the biggest constraint to achieving this kind of collaboration and interdisciplinarity? And what actions can be taken to overcome that barrier?
Let's see. I think cross-disciplinary discussion is very difficult. We often talk about collaboration between biophysical and natural scientists and social scientists. But often it's very challenging because we often talk different languages. So patience and certain, but I think young people are more adaptive. And how do we actually, we cannot, train someone who is a jack of all trades. Everyone has to have disciplinary specialization, yet being able to discuss across. I was fascinated by all the finance talks because, wow, it's a different world. But then maybe there is something about sustainability that is not more the better. How do we actually continue slow but positive growth? That kind of discussion, maybe we need to have a different languages. How do we actually talk cross different, disciplines?
Thank you.
That's a major challenge.
Great. Michael, also from the science side, what's the big barrier to doing this, and why aren't they being integrated at every stage of the forest and landscape restoration process?
I think there are 2 points, and I fully agree with what had been said, that this difficulty to do interdisciplinary work with different scientific fields and promote this understanding and coming up with results which are then really value added by bringing these disciplines together. But a more prominent reason, and I talk much more now on the local level, not so much on the international level, where many things have been done already, is simply science communication and science-society interactions. Scientists try and like to talk about their science. This is of no interest to any practitioner. So we need to start from the policy question, we need to start from the practical questions, and then use the scientific information actually to provide innovation or solutions to something. So this kind of communication is essential to be an accepted part of that social process and the transition to more sustainable land use.
Are scientists being trained to do that today?
Only partly, and UFRA has taken, and of course with the help of many others, and I know that the science communication skills as well as also science policy interaction skills need dramatically to be increased. Okay. And UFRA is running such training workshops and courses also, but much more would need to be done, so that kind of participation of scientists in the FLR or in the transition processes is enhanced.
Okay, great. What do you think?
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned just now, actually we are the international intergovernmental organization. We have the member states, 44 member states, of which 43 from the global south, including China, the host country for the organization.
But what's the barrier? What's making it difficult for that group to work together?
I'm talking about the South-South cooperation, the challenge, what we have. The first thing for our side is about the policy, because all the awareness reading for the particular resources of bamboo and rattan. What we do from MINBA side, we are working on the promotion of the policy advice to our member states. Not only the countries with bamboo and rattan resources, they recognize the value of the particular resources, but we really need the promotion for policy makers for them to know how about the value of the bamboo resources and the products or industry can provide for the country. That means we develop the national planning together with our member countries, and we invite the people from our member countries, those host countries and other countries with the resources to come together to get the ideas to move forward for their policy development. Actually, that's really important thing. We can say that's a barrier or challenge, but actually the other side is also an opportunity, because once the policymaker, they recognize the importance of the resources, industries, and the benefit for the local people, we can move forward for the sector development for our South-South cooperation. That's really important.
Right. So it's the collaborative planning from an early stage if you want to see action at the end.
Even through the whole process. That's very important for the policymaker to support.
That's great. I had you last in this round because you've looked very deeply at what it is people need to know. And so they need to be trained in how to facilitate collective action. Can you give us 3 specific skills that you think everyone in this room probably ought to have or might wish to acquire. I won't be so.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, as I said already, the skills that you really need is the skills to go beyond your own borders, to go beyond the borders of your own institution and organization, so that you can meet at the borderline. That is, I think, what is really important. But allow me also to bring in another notion, and might be a bit out of the issue here, but what I see is that we are talking a lot about landscapes, and we talk about how to get into sustainable landscapes. But as coming from an agriculture university, what I really miss is the notion of sustainable food systems, sustainable and inclusive food systems. And I think that is the skills also that people need to think from that way to come to collective action. Because in that way, you can really get also consumers into action. I would say let's go beyond certification and see that consumers want food to come from sustainable landscapes. And then we are talking. And I was already very happy with your notion of food business, because we need a business case also for farmers. If you want farmers and farm workers and their families to go into action and into collective action, they need a decent living, and they can only get a decent living from food systems that work, that are a business case. So it's maybe a bit beyond what you're asking me, but I think it's about leadership and collective action from the bottom, from farmers and farmer workers.
Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Let me ask a couple of sort of specific questions. Dennis, you are very optimistic about the potential for meeting the AFR 100 goals, 100 million hectares. It's now more committed than that. I learned the newest number for that here for Africa. People are saying these processes of change are slow. You think there's ways that collective action can actually accelerate that process. Why do you think that? What do you think
the question
happening?
comes up a lot. You know, is it really possible to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land in Africa by 2030? And my answer to that is definitely yes. And for those of you who were here yesterday to listen to Tony Rinaudo's story of what was accomplished in just 1 out of 50 countries in Africa over the past couple of decades, where about 7 million hectares have now been mapped as of yesterday, restored through the process of farmer-managed natural regeneration. So, Sarah, the really key things to avoid getting off onto sidetracks and to miss the opportunity of restoring such a large amount of it is, like Tony, we need to focus. We need to focus on the most cost-effective, simplest, adoptable kinds of land restoration practices, of which farmer-managed natural regeneration is one, where farm families can practice land restoration with no outside cash investment, with very little in the way of need for deep extension programs, etc. So the lesson that Tony was teaching us is that, yes, it's possible on a huge scale. And he was a little edgy, if you recall, because, you know, there's so much inertia to actually seeing the simplest ways of going about that.
But are you suggesting, in fact, that we want to pursue objectives that don't require collective action?
Well, that requires collective action, and in Tony's case,
what is it we support in terms of collective action?
You know, the biggest barrier to agroforestry, tree systems, natural regeneration, is collective action at the local level, usually to control livestock grazing systems in the dry season. If you can get that nailed through collective action, then you're really on your way.
Great.
And I think I've learned one more thing, Sarah. As of today, listening to Joe's presentation, I think for our collective action efforts, we need to look a little bit more at those lemon sprays, you know? Those lemon sprays that might just make our collective action efforts much more effective. What do you think, Joe?
Michael, briefly, what do you think, what actions do you recommend to UFRO to take to really accelerate the change that you're saying toward more effective collaboration in the field?
But a recommendation to UFRO would mean a recommendation to 650 research organizations in 126 countries.
Excellent.
Of course, that these research institutions, of course, in some parts, of course, of the world it happens, but in many it doesn't, can play the role, an active role in that transition to more sustainable land use, to improving land for many purposes, or even to restore lost ecosystem services and social benefits. Definitely they need to increase their science communication, but not between scientists, but the communication of useful results to stakeholders, to work on practical applied science issues, as well as influence policy, shaping the local policy from the village level to the district, to the province, as well as to the national level. Okay. And of course, UFRO also does, and many of our members do, supporting young scientists in actually being these agents of change, because they are more adaptive. So they can change and they communicate much better than the old ones. And example setting from UFRO's governance, to have a Global Forest Expert Panel, World Forest Society Environment Program, to show these examples, which actually can be taken by the members, would be actions to be recommended in the framework of UFRO.
Fantastic. Hedvig, what do you feel is you started to discuss about the food systems. What are the particular challenges in promoting food systems for collective action? What do we need to be doing differently than what we've been doing to make the shift into food systems?
To make a change into food systems, that's first of all to think from the farmer's perspective. So farmers are living in the landscapes, and farmers workers as well. And there you have the businesses, you have the government. So that's where indeed your collective action and your multi-stakeholder collaboration starts from. That's the starting point. So I would say it should be inclusive and sustainable food systems within sustainable landscapes. That's the mind shift we should take.
Fantastic. Okay, Hiroto, tell us what you think should be you mentioned finance. You just said it briefly. What is the challenge for collective action in terms of mobilizing resources for landscape transformation?
Yes. So maybe the collective action among our partners, and then because now even at this time there are forums, so many stakes and as participants come together. Why don't you just make together to getting the finance from the financial institutions and a good proposal? And then, of course, one of the examples is for the UFROs and the CFOs and the GLF. So that's a combination with science and also our technical agencies is a quite a good combination to try to make the land restorations. At the same time, a little bit different perspective is, so how to just also making that the good values added in the process of land and forest restorations. So maybe as a word, so value chain, more or less. Also nowadays we can very much concentrate on that forest value chain. So to adding the value and also creating that further investment opportunities, particularly from private finance. This is quite important.
Okay. Thank you very much. How about you, Wu? What is your sense of how INBAR can further facilitate cooperation within your network? What are the kinds of steps, practical steps, that you can take to further enrich that collaboration?
Thank you. We always said that INBAR, actually INBAR's name, former name is INBAR, is International Network for Bambuan Town. Now we are the organization by treaty, is an international intergovernmental organization. Before that, actually it was a network. Yeah. That means we are networking with the people from around us with the resources, particular plants to develop the industry, not only for the landscape management, but also for the wide range of the activities, including livelihood development, including clean energy, bioenergy, and also the biodiversity, the related SDG topics. For us to extend our South-South cooperation, the network, we actually, as I mentioned just now, from the policy sectors, we closely work with our member states, with our our partners, like UN bodies, like our regional partners from the institute, also like UFRO, we are a very good network for many years. And the other side is to promote the knowledge sharing and the capacity building to transfer the technology transfer between the member states. And that's also very important. When we think about the industry, when we think about the collaboration, we need some actions between the countries, between the member states. We have some countries like China, the host country, they are the leading country for the bamboo industry. But for the rest of the world, rest of the member states, they are actually lack of the information, lack of the capacity, lack of the knowledge. That's what we have to do in future. For example, it takes some time. We have had implemented a project, Sino-Dutch project, bilaterally between China and the Netherlands. But we extend the project to the 3 African countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda, help them act together, actually, not only 5 countries, but also our partners, donors, and also the technology supporters from scientists and researchers, and also the private sectors to work together from different sectors, different countries to help the project, to support the project for the capacity building and knowledge sharing for local communities to learn more about how to develop their bamboo industry for their benefits.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Kaoru, how about you? Tell us a little bit about what you think that academic societies could do to enhance this kind of collective action and collaboration needed.
Right. I think academic society has a role to actually go beyond individual lab, university, discipline. And so I think it's critically important for the skills. And I think listening to all of you, trust is important, food issue is important. Next year in May, there will be GLF in Kyoto with the theme of Return to Kyoto. I think when we look back history and think about challenge, the most important thing is to listen to others without one's own bias. And how do you actually recognize that bias yourself? And so academic society is a place where we can exchange different views and ideas. Maybe it's very discipline specific, but it provides safe arena and training for people to voice differences in opinions and then come up with collective action.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Before we wrap up, I'd like to ask each one of our panelists to give us one phrase or one sentence of something you'd like to see happen at GLF 2019 that would advance the collective action efforts that you think are important. One sentence. Who'd like to start? Shall I just pick somebody? How about you? One sentence. Here is Robert right here, listening to you.
Right. Be aware of one's own bias and continue evidence-based actions.
Thank you. Hiroto?
Okay, so go to field and create and the story of landscapes and explain to everybody.
Okay, I think they've started to try to do that here, yes. Dennis, one thing that should happen at GLF 2019.
Well, I'm just wondering if we could have...
one sentence.
One sentence.
Sorry, you're my friend, I can do that.
I'm just wondering if we could have more focus on specific planning for landscape restoration to get beyond the glittering generalities of our discussions and look at real substance in terms of pulling collective action together amongst the wonderful organizations that are here. I think a little imagination on that side.
Fantastic.
Along with lemon spray.
Lemon sprays, right. Hector?
Yes, I aim for the GLF in 2019 that we train as much as possible young change agents through our massive online open courses which we all organize.
Landscape Academy. Okay.
Okay, thank you. In the end, together we will continue to stress the opportunity that bamboo, the great grass, multifunctional functional plants provide for sustainable development through collective actions.
Pavilions with bamboo. Michael.
Well, I think that it's important to maybe even more emphasize that the restoration activity is just a means to an end, and that we are targeting sustainable land uses, and the ways to that sustainable land use can be very different. Not too much on these means, but of course that there is an end to it. Yeah? So I think this emphasis should be much more prominent, I think, in the sessions in 2019.
Fantastic. There we have a bit of an action agenda started for next year. Thank you so much. Let's give an applause for all of our panelists. Thank you so much, everybody. You were wonderful, and thanks for the time. Thanks all of you all for being here, and we look forward to hearing feedback from you. Bye.